Hello, and welcome to CeaseAndDiceist. Yes, yet another punnily named YouTube channel where we will be hosting our new role-playing show. My name is Martin Hume, and I will be your host and Games Master. I'll be joined by 5 players who will be hurling their player characters into the starry abyss of Farsight the tabletop role-playing game. Farsight is a new science fiction RPG which has just been released through Kickstarter by Lightfish Games. For those familiar with established games like Dungeons&Dragons, Traveller or Call of Cthulhu, a lot of the basic concepts of the game are essentially the same. But Farsight does have its own twist on the formula, so I thought we'd put together a quick introduction so that those of you following along with our adventures can get acquainted with the system and get to know me a little as well. Of course, there's nothing stopping you from jumping straight in with episode 1 and picking up the rules as we go along. You'll realise pretty quickly that story will trump rules in most cases anyway. But who are CeaseAndDiceist? Well, nobody famous, that's for sure. I'm afraid none of us will be familiar faces to you. We've no minor celebrities or anything like that, and I lay no claim to being a professional games master either. My only qualification is that I've been involved in the hobby for a long time, about 40 years at this point, and that doesn't bestow me with any particular insight or any gaming wisdom to pass on. It simply means I've played a lot and GM'd a lot, and my enthusiasm for the hobby has never left me. My one advantage is that I'm very lucky to play in several different gaming groups. So when I was putting together the idea for this latest campaign, I thought it might be fun to pick a few players from each of those different groups, put them together, record the whole thing, and put it out there for others to enjoy. The people I've invited to play are a mixed bunch. Some have played RPGs for almost as long as I have, others for a few years, and one has never actually played before in her life. Pretty much all of us have some acting experience of some kind, and we're all comfortable with improvising. So that's who we are. But what can you expect from the game? What's the premise? 200 years into our future, the human race, the Terrans as they're described in Farsight, have managed to avoid destroying themselves in conflict or ecological disaster. We discover warp technology, allowing us to travel many times faster than the speed of light and opening up the way to distant stars. And so began a new era of exploration and expansion. It didn't take long for us to discover that we are not alone in the universe and that many of the local star systems are populated with numerous other races. The pressures of overpopulation pushed the Terrans to attempt to expand into these systems, and very soon we found ourselves at war with, well, everybody. For over 10 years, war has raged across the known galaxy, the Terrans exhibiting an incredible ability to assimilate the technology of other races and use it for their own ends. At the same time, and perhaps even more disturbingly, they appeared to go through an accelerated development in their burgeoning psionic abilities. Eventually, an alliance of races, which became known as the Hegemony and the Kurgan Empire, defeated the Terrans and forced them to negotiate a peace. Now their fleet have disbanded and Earth annexed by the Kurgan Empire. The Terrans find themselves homeless and seeking refuge amongst the very people they once warred against. And if that weren't enough, Terrans find themselves restricted by laws introduced to prevent them from ever again causing war. No Terran is allowed to command a warp-capable ship, not legally at least. The known galaxy has been changed forever by what has become known as the Diaspora War. New lines have been drawn between the territories of the Hegemony and the Kurgan Empire. An uneasy truce lies over the galaxy, but one wrong move between these two factions could push the galaxy once again into war. Now, as I said at the top of the video, Farsight is a new science fiction role-playing game. It's just been released in the autumn of 2022. It's a huge undertaking by the team at Lightfish. The core book is a beautifully illustrated 348-page monster, covering the basic rules of the game, new races and backgrounds, psionics, cybernetics, spaceship design and combat, as well as chapters diving deep into the concept of campaign design and games mastering. It's a complete toolkit with which you can create your own sci-fi universe. It's a modern game, and by which I mean you can expect the rules of the game to support narrative role-playing. The lives of the player characters will not be sold cheaply, and good role-playing will trump the rulebook every time. You can expect serious plots and intrigue, combat, sneakiness, lots of sneakiness knowing my players, but plenty of laughter and silliness along the way. We won't be taking ourselves too seriously, but we won't let that undermine the drama when it occurs. Underpinning this is a rule system which Lightfish called Double 12 system. It's familiar enough for those coming from other systems that they should be able to dive in quickly and get on with creating the game. But there are some differences, and that's really the meat of what I wanted to talk about. Anyone who's been watching other actual play shows, or indeed has been running their own tabletop games, will be familiar with a fundamental rule that occurs in almost all traditional RPGs. When a moment of crisis occurs in the plot, or a decision hangs in the balance, the players roll a 20-sided dice, or a percentage dice, or maybe 2d6 to determine the outcome of what's at stake. The dice roll, plus any positive or negative modifiers for skills, abilities, or environmental circumstances, are all added together to see if they beat a target number. If they beat the number, the event goes in the player's favour. If not, there's going to be some sort of negative outcome to the situation. You fail to subvert the security code on the airlock door, or you take damage from that blaster shot, and so forth. Well, here's where things get a little funky in Farsight, because here we're rolling two 12-sided dice instead. So why the change to 2d12? Gimmick? Well, let's take a look at that. When we make a dice roll in most role-playing games, we either succeed or fail. It's a binary outcome. Now, you can fail harder or succeed better by rolling critical fails or successes, but it's still effectively a yes or no outcome. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it can make for great drama when everything hinges on the roll of a dice. However, rolling with 2d12 opens up the possibility for a little more nuance. Under the rules of Farsight, you can still critically fail or succeed if you roll a 1 or a 12 on either of your dice. You can still have advantage or disadvantage, rolling 3d12 and taking the two best or two worst outcomes. But what happens when you roll a natural 1 on a 12, but still have a big enough total when you add the dice together to beat the target number for success? Now we have a success, but with a negative rider, if you will. So you do beat the security protocol on the airlock door, but it alerts the ship's AI to what you're doing. You dodge that blaster shot, but it hits something important on your vac suit, and now you're venting oxygen. The dice roll is now helping to build the story rather than simply providing an outcome. In short, it helps me, the GM, add a little extra spice to the narrative. And by the way, just for the sake of completeness, rolling a 12 on one dice and a 1 on the other cancels each roll out, and it simply counts as 13 plus or minus any modifiers. So, now let's take a look at the Farsight character sheet and see what Lightfish have done with the core attributes. So, at first glance, we can see plenty that's familiar. It's a nice, clean, straightforward character sheet. Things like dexterity, strength and intelligence are all still here in the attributes, but have now been added to with combativity, perception and tech. Other attributes you might be used to, like charisma and constitution, have now been turned into skills, with constitution being renamed as stamina. So why the change? I suppose we'd have to ask the designers themselves to answer that one, but I'd like to suggest one reason. I think it's a kind of manifesto for the game. By including these new attributes, it signposts what the team at Lightfish feel is important in a Farsight game. Creating a tech stat and a specific combat stat, we can expect to see these things front and centre in any game session. And not just that, but feats of strength, both physical and mental, fast-talking PCs who use their wits rather than brawn to overcome problems. It's a system that supports players being able to tailor-make their character they really want to play without resorting to game fiat to do so. So why have I chosen to use Farsight for our game? Well, firstly, there are plenty of excellent shows running fantasy campaigns out there, and we wanted to try and offer you something different. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, the core gamebook doesn't offer a particular background or worldview, which lets myself and the players come up with our own game universe in which to tell our stories. But what Farsight does come with is a solid set of rules and a whole slew of character races and backgrounds, giving the players plenty of options to create interesting characters. We will be filming character generation, and if you'd like to see that and how the players develop their characters and motivations and connections to one another, that video will be available on our Patreon site. So there you have it, a brief look at the Double 12 system and Farsight and what we intend to do with it. You can find links below to our Patreon site and to Lightfish Games. And do please subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you join us as we begin our journey and discover new stories. Perhaps give us a like, or not, to see if we can gauge how popular the new series is likely to be. And I'd love to see your thoughts on the Double 12 system down in the comments section. But for now, this is Martin Hume, signing off and wishing you all the very best until we meet again. Goodbye for now.
This is Admiral Trevelyan, Commander of Terran Forces. To all units, the battle for Earth is over. We can no longer protect our home. Our so-called leaders have capitulated to the Kurgan and a ceasefire has been issued. I intend to save what forces I can and fight on. I will return to claim our birthright. To humanity I say, see to your homes and your families, save yourselves and your loved ones, but look to the skies. We will have vengeance.